Good morning, viewers. Welcome back to the Moose Mobile Auto Repair channel. And today we're working on a 2019 Honda Civic with the 2-liter engine. And we are going to be replacing the rear brakes on this, rotors and pads. This particular Civic has the electronic calipers. So we need to grab a scan tool to deactivate the calipers so we're able to push the pistons in for the new pads. We need to put the electronic calipers into a service mode before we are able to start working on the brakes. So you can see here that this vehicle has the electronic calipers. So we're going to go inside the vehicle now to go on the scan tool. You need a capable scan tool of some sort to put the brakes into a service mode. So we are going to do that now. You can use any capable scan tool. I'm using the Launch X431. This is a 5 plus V plus. So I've had this scan tool for a few years now. 2019 Civic. So we're just going to go into the brake system. Canada. Okay, we go to system selection. So you need to go into the anti-lock braking system and go to special function, and then you see brake pad maintenance mode. So go to brake pad maintenance mode. This function is used in rear brake pad maintenance. Please refer to the service manual for the work procedure. Okay. So enter brake pad maintenance mode. Release the parking brake. Stop the vehicle battery voltage over 10 volts. We're going to release the parking brake. Go okay. And you'll see, I think you'll see a bunch of dash lights on while you're in maintenance mode. So please wait a moment. Transition to brake pad exchange mode has been completed. Perform rear brake pad maintenance. Okay. And that's it now. So this, I think you can turn the ignition off now. Typically when this happens, you will be able to hear the motor. So I don't know if you guys heard anything or not. So we're just going to turn the ignition off. Now one thing I wanted to mention is before you push the calipers in, you want to make sure that you take some of the brake fluid out if there's too much excess brake fluid, because when you push the pistons in, the brake fluid level is going to rise. So you want to make sure you take some of the brake fluid out if the level is too high. So I put the vehicle into the maintenance mode, so you should be able to push the calipers in now. Once the vehicle has been put into maintenance mode, I'm just going to use a screwdriver. You should be able to push the calipers all the way in now. So that's how you know if you have successfully got into the mode. Unfortunately, I couldn't film and where you hear the motor retract back. So just make sure it's pushed in all the way. If you need to push the piston in some more when the caliper is off, that's fine. I'm just using a screwdriver just to check, just to double check, to make sure that I'm able to push the pistons all the way. So now the first thing you want to do is to remove the two protective caps out. The caliper bolts, the mounting bolts are a 7mm Allen key or hex key. It's a 7mm. And the same for the bottom. One thing that you need to do is to remove the spring clip out of the way. That's actually the first thing that you're supposed to do. Just make sure you have your safety glasses on, because just in case of the spring, if it wants to fly around and hit you in the face. It should be able to come out relatively easy. It's best to replace it with a new one if your brake pad kit comes with one. Otherwise, you will have to reuse this. So the mounting bolts are removed now. You will need to push them in with the screwdriver if they're not out all the way. So you can put the caliper onto the side, remove the brake pads, and this customer probably like 1mm left on this, so there's not much brake pads left on this side, on the outboard side, but there is on the inboard side. These are the original brake pads, I think, at 90,000 kilometers. So just make sure you note the orientation of the brake pads in case if you are not familiar with doing brakes on vehicles. So now we need to remove the two, I believe, 17mm bolts that's holding the bracket in place. There's two of the 17 bolts. You can use a long wrench or something, or a long ratchet and a socket on whatever works for you. It's a very tight fit here because of the suspension. So remove the caliper bracket out of the way. Now there's a rotor screw that holds holds the brake caliper down. So usually on what I use an impact driver tool to typically get these out. In most cases, in probably like 50% of the time, you'll be able to get this out. If not, you'll have to try using other methods to get this out. You can just use a hammer to get this out. It will shock the screw, and you should be able to get it out in most cases. Other cases, you may have to use like a chisel or something to turn them, and sometimes you might even need to heat them up in some cases, and in other cases you may just have to use an air hammer or something and grind them down and just remove them. You do not need the rotor screws if you don't want to reinstall them back. This is just used for the vehicles when they roll down the assembly line. It's just to make things easier. So remove the rotor. Now it's a good time to have a look at the wheel bearing and stuff, see if there's any noises or play, and that will signify that you have a bad wheel bearing. I think that this one is making a little bit of noise. So before we start, you want to make sure that you have the correct parts. Make sure that everything is exactly the same. Brake pads, everything the same. The last thing you want to find out is that you are working and servicing the brakes, only to find out that you have the incorrect parts. And make sure the rotors and everything are exactly the same. So we're just going to clean the hub of any rust. Clean the hub and over here of any rust. That was just the wheel stud cleaner tool that I typically use when doing brakes. We are also going to clean the inside here of any rust or debris, but make sure you're careful and not damage the dust boot. Make sure you clean the contact point over here on where the pad is going to sit in contact. I know that some guys, they take like a wire wheel or a grinding wheel to clean the area down. So you can do on whatever works best for you. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that you want to inspect the calipers. So in order to inspect them, you want to lift on the dust boot to see if there's any traces of brake fluid. And typically, if you see any traces of brake fluid, that will tell you that the calipers are leaking and you need to replace or rebuild the calipers. You just want to be very careful and not damage the boot. Sometimes there may be some assembly lube inside here, assembly lubricant, so you need to watch out for that, to not mistake that for brake fluid. And also, if you want, you can disconnect this connector out if you want, but I would just leave it alone. I don't like to disturb things if it's not needed. So I'm just having a look to see if there's any brake fluid here. I don't really see much. I just see like some assembly lube stuff, but that's about it. If you look closely, when I lift up the boot, you see some wet spot. I think that's just assembly lube, so it's not anything to worry about. So you can continue cleaning the caliper area. You want to make sure that you do all of your cleaning first before you start putting on the new stuff, because otherwise you're going to get the new stuff all dirty with dirt and debris. So the new stuff meaning the new rotors and pads. So you want to make sure you do all of the cleaning first. Once the cleaning is done, and then you can start putting on the rotors and the pads. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, because you're not going to get every single speck of rust out of there. So just do the best you can. Now there's one thing that I like to do if I'm able to. I like to remove these boots, the bushing, so I can clean the corrosion or rust inside the caliper. So typically on what I do, I use a screwdriver like this, being careful to not damage anything. And you should be able to safely to remove them. See all that corrosion and rust? You want to make sure that you clean that, because if you don't clean it over time, the corrosion and the rust is going to build up, then squeeze against the rubber bushing, and then the slider pin will not be able to move effectively. And you'll see the corrosion here on the rubber. Usually I clean them out. You want to do the same for the bottom as well. See all that rust? You want to make sure you clean this out. And I know that almost nobody does this, and this is a very important step that you need to do. So what I like to do, I like to use a carbide bit to clean these down, or you can use like a roll of sandpaper to get in there. So I just attach this to my Milwaukee die grinder. So I just like to clean it like this, but I go very slowly to make sure that I don't grind down the metal. This will clean all of the rust and everything. Any rust or corrosion that's inside there. You don't want to go too overboard, because then you're going to grind down the metal, and you don't want that. We are going to do the bushings now. Try your best to clean as much of the rust as possible. Not going to be 100% perfect. Very hard to get to the outer edges here, so just try your best. Do the same for the other one. So now we're just going to wash the area down with some brake cleaner. Now is a good time to wash everything down now. So now on what I'm using the green stuff, this silicone brake lubricant. I'm going to be using this on the sliders, but for the contact points I like to use the orange stuff. I haven't used these on the slider pins yet, but I've heard of some people having some issues with some of this stuff for the sliders. So I just use this for the contact points only. And I'm just using this for the slider pins. It doesn't really matter on what you do, really. Just do on what you prefer to do, but just make sure you are using the correct lubricant for the application. So what am I going to do now is put some of the caliper lube inside the ear of the caliper. The same for the bottom. This will help to prevent corrosion and rust in the future. And then you want to do the same for the bushings. You want to do the same. I'm just trying my best to not mix up the bushings. I'm putting it in the same spot as the way I found them. And the same for the inside. And then when you are ready to install them, you just install them by hand. You would have to squeeze the ends in order to get it in. That's the way that I usually do it, and always been doing it all these years. So, and you want to turn it too, just to make sure that it's in properly. You want to turn this, make sure it's in and seated in properly, and wipe off the excess. And do the same for the other one. So the other one is the same thing. You just need to do that by hand only. And wipe down the excess. So what's left, we're going to be servicing the caliper. We're going to clean everything down. But before we do that, we're going to go to the new pads and spray down some of the disc brake quiet that I usually use. So I'm going to be using the disc brake quiet. This is just applies a film onto the backing of the pads for some brake pads that can be problematic sometimes. So to eliminate and to dampen out the noise, a lot of shops use this for cheap insurance because they don't want to have comebacks, and even sometimes the OEM pads can have issues in some cases. So I've seen a lot of shops, they use this. This just creates a film on the backing of the pads to dampen out the movement from the caliper. They call it caliper hopping, to prevent caliper hopping. So this will help to eliminate noise if will be any noise in the braking system. It's just it's something that that shops and someone like myself use for cheap insurance on every brake job for the just in case moments, because shops cannot afford downtime to have a comeback, so that's why they use it. It's not required. It's just something that hey, if it's something that you can use just in case if there's any noise or anything. So we're just gonna spray a little bit on the backing of the pads, and typically you don't need to spray too much, but typically you have to wait like 5 to 10 minutes for these to dry up. So we'll probably wait like 5-10 minutes for this to dry, and as we are servicing the caliper bracket, this will have dried up already. So we're just going to service the caliper now. You can use a wire brush or something. If you don't have all of the fancy stuff, you can use sandpaper and wire brush, and that's fine. Want to make sure you clean as much of the rust as possible. You don't want to grind down too much to the bare metal. You just want to just enough to clean the rust off, because you don't want to cause any problems. Because if you grind too much off, it's possible to have like a clunking noise, because there'll be too much clearance for the brake pads. So you don't want to clean off too much of the rust off. You don't want to get like exactly to the bare metal, just a regular clean. Clean on the inside too. And this is where the spring is going to touch here. So you want to clean this area too. So I clean the rest of the rust off camera. I don't want to clean too much because I don't want to grind down too much of the metal. So you need to be careful. So this is good. So now we're just going to lubricate this, and then we're going to clean the sliders, and then start to put everything all back together. I'm going to use the orange stuff now for the contact points. A little bit here. That should be good. You don't need to put too much grease. Excess grease is gonna get onto the brake pads if you put too much. So you need to be careful on how much you use. Just need to put a small amount. So now we're going to clean the slider pins. So we are going to lubricate the slider pins now. You can insert them inside the caliper. Don't need to put too much of the lubricant. So what's left now is to clean the rust on the caliper bolts for the mounting bolts. There's not too much rust here, but that's okay. There isn't really a whole lot of rust on these bolts, but I'm gonna be applying some of the silver grade anti-seize stuff. Put some of the anti-seize. You don't need to put too much, but just enough to cover up the threads. So now I'm just going to spray this area down one last time just to clean it. And we're going to put some anti-seize on the hub. You can put some fluid film or white grease or on whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. I know a lot of guys don't like to use anti-seize stuff because it gets everywhere. Waiting for the brake cleaner to dry up. Put some anti-seize now on the hub. I know that some haters are gonna hate, but whatever. There's not much I can do for you. For the guys who don't like the anti-seize stuff, so I think that's enough. You don't need to put too much, just enough to cover it up. And we are going to give the new brake rotor a quick clean first before we install it. Make sure you line up the brake rotor and where the rotor screw hole goes into. So grab the new rotor and spray some brake cleaner. On some rotors, the coated rotors, they say not to apply brake cleaner, but you can spray some on the shop towel if you don't want to spray directly onto the surface. I always spray onto the. I put some brake cleaner just in case, because when the brake rotors are in shipment, in packaging and shipment, there's are some residual oils. The manufacturers, they may spray some rust inhibitors, some sort of spray oil on the rotors to prevent the rotors from rusting during packaging and shipment. And so you have to use brake cleaner to clean out all of the residual oils that may be on the brake rotors, because if you don't, and the oil is going to contaminate the friction material on the brake pads, so you need to be careful. So it's always best practice. It's always best practice to clean the brake rotors with some brake cleaner, just in case if there's any oil, residual oil that is left over on the brake rotor. So that's why you always want to clean the brake rotor with some brake cleaner, just to be on the safe side. Even though that if you don't see any oil, still it's always a good idea to spray brake cleaner on the brake rotors. So now you can install a new brake rotor. We're going to reinstall the rotor screw back. I'm going to put some anti-seize on it. And tighten down the rotor screw. So what's left to install the brake caliper bracket with the 17 millimeter bolts. I'm not able to fit the ratcheting wrench in there, so it's because of the aluminum housing in the suspension. It does not allow you to do that. I'm just doing this by hand for now until I'm most of the way in. I know that most of you guys are not gonna have the fancy stuff, so that's okay. I will post a torque spec for you guys to see on the screen. And my torque spec is just the good and tight, the good and tight German method. There was a guy in the comments section on YouTube. He was making me laugh. He said it's Guten Poopen, then it's all good. Guten Poopen, then you're all good to go. These don't need to be extremely tight, but just make sure that when you tighten the caliper, make sure that the rotor still spins. You may need to re-tighten the rotor screw to keep the rotor in place. Still have to clean the the rotor from the excess lubricant. Just gonna spray some brake cleaner a bit to get rid of that stuff. Always have to give the rotor several wipes to make sure you didn't get any of the lubricant stuff on it. So always have to be careful. So typically when I install the inboard pad, I make sure that the wear indicator is at the bottom on the inboard side. And just like the original Honda pads, you see the arrow is facing up. Some pads are directional, so it's going to matter on what side you put them on. So you have to watch out for that. Some pads I've seen, they have inboard and outboard, so you need to watch out to see if the aftermarket ones have that or not. If it doesn't, then you're okay. This one has an arrow facing upwards on the Honda. So before you install the pad, we're going to lubricate the ears, the contact points. Don't need to put too much. Install that. These pads are relatively very easy to install compared to the other vehicles. This, we're gonna do it this way, carefully. And when you install a caliper, I believe the caliper is supposed to apply some pressure on the spring here. It's supposed to sit against the spring. So you want to make sure that you do that. There's a specific way that when you install the caliper, it should sit onto the spring. So we're going to push the sliders out. Hopefully I pushed the caliper just enough to get this to fit, and it goes in. So when you install the caliper, you got to make sure that it pushes against the two springs here. Otherwise, it's not going to be installed properly. So for these particular slider pins, you just go by feel. You really don't have to start them by hand, but you can if you want. If you want to be on the safe side, just until the threads catches onto the inside of the caliper bracket. You could use a half extension if you're able to make it fit inside there. If not, and you just use the hex socket itself. You can thread it in by hand first if you want to be on the safe side. And there's no harm in doing that. Do the same for the bottom. In some cases, you may have to apply downwards pressure onto the caliper so that you're able to get the slider pins started. I'll put the torque spec on the screen for you guys to see. These don't need to be on extremely tight. No more than probably like 20 foot-pounds at most, I think. So once you're done, you can install the caps, protective caps. And make sure that the caliper slides back and forth. Double check your work. Make sure that the ears of the brake pads are seated in properly before you install the spring. So make sure that the pads are seated in all the way and properly, and that you're able to spin the rotor. If in any case you're not able to spin the rotor, and then that means that something is wrong, and you have to take it apart to see on what's going on. Now we got some new springs that came with the brake pads, so we're going to use that. They also have spare brake pad springs as well, but they are already installed onto the brake pads, so you don't need these. So what I do, I like to lubricate the spring on where it goes inside the hole to prevent rust. And you probably want to put a tiny amount on the outside, because that's where it's going to touch and to move. Just want to put a tiny amount. So usually I like to install this in one of the opening first. And at the same time, I install it in the bottom. But I put this on the outside. I put this on the inside here first, in the first hole, and then this, I leave this like this, and I try to install this on the other hole here. So I'll show you on what I mean. I'm gonna use a hammer to tap that in. If you can get it in all at once at the same time, and then that's good. You may need to push it in to get it seated all the way. So I'm having some issues with the new clips, aftermarket clips, so I'm just going to reuse the old one. There's no harm in reusing the old one. It's perfectly fine, because these aftermarket clips are not seating in properly against the inside here for some reason. So I'm just going to reuse the old Honda stuff, because I don't trust the aftermarket ones. It's not sitting in all the way. This one sits in all the way. Even I push the caliper all the way back, it's still not seating in. So I'm just going to reuse the old Honda spring clip, and that's okay. It's not really a big deal, to be honest. You can use a screwdriver or chisel or whatever, and that's fine. Just make sure that it's all the way inside the mounting holes, and then that's it. I still have to do the other side. I'm not going to show that because it's the same exact thing, but I'm going to clean the rotor again, put some anti-seize here, and then that's going to be it for this side. This is the right rear that I'm working on at the moment. Just give this a quick wipe with some brake cleaner. Make sure you push back on the backing plate in case it doesn't rub against the backing plate, and then you're all done. One thing I forgot to mention on some other vehicles, I don't think it's common on these vehicles because of the design of the slider pins. There is something called an airlock. Now, on the brakes that have the bushings, the boots inside, I think the front brakes are like this. So for the front brakes, I think if you put too much of the lubricant and you don't use a screwdriver to push out any excess lubricant, it's possible to build up an airlock inside the boots. So if there's an airlock, the vehicle will pull onto the one side in which that has the airlock on, or the one that has most of the air inside the boot, so it will pull to that side during moderate braking. I've ran into this problem before in my earlier years. So if the vehicle pulls to the left under moderate braking, it would be the right caliper that has the airlock on. If the vehicle pulls on to the right under moderate braking, then it's the left caliper that has the airlock. So it's opposite when you are braking. I've ran into this issue before. I don't know if other people have, but I learned the hard way. So ask me on how I know. I'm going to be making a separate video doing the front brake service, just servicing. So hopefully I'll be able to show you that later on. So now I'm done servicing the brakes. We're going to turn the ignition to on. Make sure you don't touch the brake pedal yet until you have went into normal mode, in which they call it on the scan tool, to normal mode. I don't know if I have to reconnect with the scan tool or not. I'm going to go back to normal mode. So make sure the following conditions are fulfilled. You want to return the pad to the normal state. Okay. It's finished. And I don't know if you heard that, but I heard that. You can hear the motor rewinding back, retracting back. So that's it for the scan tool. After that's done, you can pump the brake pedal several times. Make sure you have a firm brake pedal and put the wheels on and go for a good road test. So make sure you pump the pedal. It's okay to pump the pedal. Pump it several times. Make sure the parking brake works. Just making sure that the parking brake is working. Try it several times. You should be able to feel the brake pedal slightly go down and slightly go up when you activate and deactivate the parking brake. So it's starting to rain now. Once you hear that the caliper retracts back, the motor retracts back, you'll be able to feel it. You'll be able to feel that the caliper is nice and stiff. That's how you know that the caliper and the piston has been retracted back. And also check the other side. Have a look at the other side to make sure that's good. The rotor spins. Everything is nice and tight. So it's starting to rain now. Just put the wheels back on and go for a good road test. Make sure everything is operating properly, and then that's it. So that's it for this one. Just make sure you top up the brake fluid if you need to top it up. And just put the wheels on and go for a good road test. Make sure the vehicle stops properly and well, and then you're all good to go. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to give it a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you're not already a subscriber, and please don't forget to hit that bell notification if you haven't done so. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good day and take care.